Welcome back to Adversity to Ascension, a podcast about turning the adversities in your life into meaning and purpose. Today, I want to welcome Ann Marie Houghtailing. Ann Marie is a storytelling and business development expert who's trained thousands of professionals all over the U.S. and abroad. She doesn't enjoy introductions any more than elevator pitches and highly doubts you care where she went to school. So here's some fun facts instead. She launched one of the first academic certification programs in the U.S. for sales and business development at the University of San Diego in 2010 because she thought it was weird that business development is the only revenue-generating activity in a business, but academic institutions don't think it's worth teaching. In addition to her book of clients, she's worked with billionaires, incarcerated men, and hospice patients. She's learned that they all share more in common than you think. Her writing has appeared in the Washington Post, Huffington Post, Daily Worth, Exo Jane, San Diego Business Journal, Yahoo Finance, and Thought Catalog. And in April of 2025, she will be publishing a chapbook of poetry entitled Little by Little with Yellow Arrow Publishing. She's written a couple of one-woman shows that none of you will ever see, at least according to her, but one was critically acclaimed, and some people in New York and San Francisco wrote some nice things about it. Houghtailing has worked with so many attorneys that people often think she is an attorney and maybe failed the bar, but for the record, she is not an attorney, nor did she go to law school. However, her business partner, Holly Amaya, is an attorney, and they are currently in the process of writing a book about peer and advisory for lawyers. With that, please welcome Ann Marie Houghtailing. Hi, Ann Marie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's so great to have you here. I'm so excited because even though you're a friend of mine, I fangirl about you, and I tell people about you all the time. What an amazing story you have. So I'm so glad that you're here to tell it.
Oh, well, thank you. That's so kind of you. And it is such a pleasure to talk to you.
You have built a remarkable career on the power of storytelling. And I have to admit that when I first learned about that, I was so mystified as to what that was. I'm in a career that was all laid out for me. Like it was all prescripted for me. I went to school some more, then I went to training, and then I started practicing, what I'd learned. But to me, the idea of making a career out of storytelling was just fascinating. And quite frankly, I'm jealous. So, so tell me, how does one do that? How do you make a career out of storytelling?
I was working in corporate training with a very small firm. A guy named John Gahegan, locally in San Diego, owned that organization. And we were doing training for banking institutions and financial institutions. And in 2009, the recession hit, and I went from traveling and having lots of work to, in one phone call, having no work. And I was a single mom with 2 kids, and my mom was alive at the time, and I had to take care of her as well. And I had to either get a job or go out on my own. And the truth was there weren't really any jobs. And I was doing corporate training at the time in a very specific way. And so I decided, well, I was just going to sort of hang my own shingle and do training. And I just sort of knew intuitively that storytelling was really important as a tool of influence when it came to business development, leadership, moving somebody's behavior, whatever it is. And I didn't really know why. And then I kind of stumbled upon all of the neuroscience and research behind it. And then it sort of just collided for me. This wasn't research I did. This was research that I just discovered about the power of storytelling in the brain and why it works to create community, build what's called habitual trust in nature. And I sort of packaged it and I started pitching it. And in 2010, I went to USD and said, hey, there aren't really any academic institutions doing certification programs for sales and business development, but literally every single business it doesn't matter if you're on your own or you have a massive company, what's generating the business is this one activity. Do you want to partner and train
Right.
about it? And they said yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really something that I just sort of pulled together, the collective intelligence that people far smarter than I had already done. I sort of took all of that work and I packaged it and I trained people how to leverage it. So we really focus, at the heartbeat of what we do is a lot of storytelling, but our company, Story Imprinting, also does everything to do with communication. So anything to do with leadership, hard conversations, negotiation, business development. And I used to do an enormous amount of executive coaching and salary negotiation. And, I still do some of that, but largely the majority of what we do is sort of contained in this storytelling and leadership kind of context. And I think for me, I just saw this as this incredibly underutilized, powerful tool that people didn't quite understand the value of. And for me, it was just a question of figuring out how to reduce that down, teach the neuroscience and social science for it, the structure and application.
That's fascinating. And I think what it makes me think of is the teachings of Milton Erickson, who was a psychiatrist that taught very much like you are doing, the linguistics of storytelling woven into, in his words, hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the storytelling itself is sort of a trance-inducing. It takes you into the conversation deeper, and the person listening as well as the person telling it.
Yeah, I mean, there's an inordinate amount of things that happen during a storytelling exchange that don't happen during regular communication. If I'm giving you directions, our brains don't synchronize. But if I'm sharing a story with you, they do. Storytelling is the only sort of form of communication that triggers oxytocin, that creates a bond between two people. Lots of people don't know that the University of Columbia has an advanced degree in narrative medicine, because what they know to be true is doctors who use storytelling have better outcomes with patients than doctors who do not. Medicine, as you well know, is not exactly, an industry or a practice that's going to integrate this if it hasn't been extraordinarily well vetted and doesn't have a very clear pathway to application.
Right.
So if they understand the application for it, then certainly the ways we are not optimizing it in business comes at a great cost, right?
Right. It certainly does. And I want to get back to your story of, this was 2009.
Yeah.
At a really bad downturn in our economy. You had two little boys at home you were supporting. You had your mother that you were supporting, and you weren't wealthy. You didn't have a lot of capital. And yet you decided, I'm going to do this on my own terms. And you talk in your book about having some thoughts about, should I just give this up and work at Target?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, listen, I would have totally gone to work at Starbucks, but I can't make all those drinks and remember all that. It just seemed too hard to me. So I just thought launching my business is the way to go. And yeah, for me, there were a couple of things going on. I mean, it was, for those who are young listening to this, 2009 was horrendous. I mean, I often joke that it was like you would be watching the news and they would be talking about how hideous the economy was, and it would drive me to drink. So I'd go to the kitchen and get a glass of wine. And by the time I got back, it was like, girl, it's worse than when you left.
Right.
It was just absolutely horrendous. The flip side of that is it didn't give me the luxury to question myself, to sort of languish. I just had to kind of throw myself in the deep end of the pool, and some things worked and some things didn't. But there, to your point, I didn't have family money. I didn't have some, huge amount of savings. I had a lot of people I was financially responsible for. And the sort of gift in the garbage of that is that it built these muscles that I just had to, nobody was going to make me get up every morning and hustle and reach out to people and try to make things happen. And so, when I come across people who are like, well, I first need to get the perfect color. I need to get this. It's like, I had a client before I had a website. I had a client before I had a business card. I could not luxuriate in sort of the self-indulgence of sort of, well, am I good enough? It didn't matter if I was good enough. Like, I had to hustle and make money because like people needed to eat and have the lights on around here. So I think that while it was incredibly difficult, and I do not want to pretend it wasn't emotionally incredibly hard, it was also just sort of a, like, you sink or swim.
In your book, you said that being able to create your own opportunity is more than philosophy. It's more than just a philosophy. It's a way of being and behaving in the world.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. I mean, I encounter people all the time who will say to me, yeah, but isn't it scary? I mean, what if you can't get a client? And, my response is always, do you think your job is secure? I mean, somebody can pull that job from you at any time. You can be unemployed at any time. I'm completely reliant on myself. And I think that while, at this moment, we're talking about this lens of business, I also think, it's the opportunity for happiness, for joy, for, it's once you sort of understand your own agency in the scope of your life, it is the only superpower we have in a lot of ways. Like, I can't control the economy. I can't control what's going to happen to me, but I have an inordinate amount of power over how I respond to those things. And that is not nothing. It's everything. And once you sort of sit in the seat of that deeply, then it radically changes the way you perceive your life. Life is not happening to you. Things are going to occur, but there are always a number of choices you get to make inside of the context of those experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's how you look at things.
Yeah.
Going back to that quote from Wayne Dyer, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Yep. And you can either choose to look at your life and your situation through that filter of, oh my God, it's horrible, I'll never find a way out of this. Or, okay, here's an opportunity for me to be innovative and to really dig deep. And you talked about having tough innards, and being able to withstand the no's that you're going to run into. What was that like for you?
I mean, you're going to get an inordinate amount of rejection when you go out into the world and try to do your own thing. If you're inside of an organization and you're trying to rise, I mean, that is not a thing you can avoid. And I think that there are lots of people who that's kind of their strategy. They want to be likable. They want to be, I'm not always going to be palatable to people. You can't, it's none of your business what other people think about you. And sometimes you're going to get rough criticism, and sometimes it's valuable. And you have to be able to sort of, I share this story a lot about, I remember somebody had said, oh, there's this guy you should meet. He was a consultant in sales and business development for years. He would be really useful. He agreed to meet with me. He was a much older guy. We met at La Jolla Tennis and Racket Club. And he was rough. He was like, well, why would anybody hire you? And why are you worth anybody writing a check? And why are you different than anybody else? And it was a pretty like gut punching, constant, like that. The whole entire lunch went that way.
Wow.
And I got in my car, and it was super, like, I felt fragile. I felt like I didn't know the answer to some of those questions. And there were two things that I thought. I would never treat a human being like that, number one. And number two, some of those questions were completely valid. And I had better figure out what the hell the answer was. And I did. And interestingly enough, after I launched the Sales and Business Development Institute with USD, there was this event I was speaking at, and he was there. And he was in the back of the room, and he was taking tons of notes. And he said, do you remember me? I said, oh, I sure do. And he's like, well done. And I was like, thank you. And it just taught me a lot about, you're going to learn lessons sometimes for people who are kind and generous. And sometimes you're going to learn things that are valuable from people who aren't as gentle. And your job isn't to be precious, it's to leech whatever you can from that. And that was what I decided to do. And I don't pretend for a moment that it's easy to sort of take rejection or it's hard, it's painful, it doesn't feel good, none of us likes it. I mean, nobody wants to be rejected, nobody wants
No.
to be turned away, nobody wants to be criticized, but you have to find a way to depersonalize it and understand that it's just information. That's all it is.
Exactly. And you can utilize it to motivate you, or you can, crawl away on your belly and go hide somewhere. But I ran into similar situations in medical school where, I was challenged by attendings that wanted their goal was to make me feel small
Mhm.
and give up and cower. And my response was, okay, I'll be the first one here every morning and the last one to leave. And you're going to see me at every turn in the hospital. You're going to know that I'm here, um, which is part of why I made straight A's in my not academic, but my clinical years, because I was always there, sticking my hand up in the air and saying, I've got the answer to the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's it, particularly when you're in a position where you don't have power, like, you're a resident,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
You're launching some kind of new thing and doors are slamming in your face. You don't feel like you have any power.
Right.
But the thing is, you also don't have anything to lose. And there's something sort of like very liberating about that. You go out and you try and you go big and you ask big. And yeah, the answer is no a lot of the time. But the thing I realize is I can't even tell you who said no to me 6 months ago or last year. I don't know. I don't remember.
Hmm.
Because it has been filled up by so many other opportunities. And I
Right.
think it's just so seductive to sort of sit in the sorrow of a moment of disappointment or what feels like failure. But, that's just a moment in time. It's not who you are, it's just a moment in time. And it's
Right.
just, if you're constantly in this forward motion, what happens is you don't sort of become kind of paralyzed by those moments that are just really like they're going to come, they're going to happen. And I
Hmm.
used to do
Hmm.
this thing, like it sounds crazy. You're the psychiatrist here, so you can comment on this, but I would say this all the time to clients, and I would do this when things were really hard and I just felt like my ass was getting kicked and I was like I'd had it. I would literally give myself like a time limit. I'd be like, you know what, all afternoon from 1 to 5 today, you don't have to do anything and you can be sad and you can take a nap and you can do whatever you want to like indulge your feelings. But then tomorrow
Yes.
it's over. Like at 6 p.m., all done. Get up, put your big
Right.
girl panties on and
Right.
go. And for me, there was something about that. Like I gave myself the emotional and psychic real estate to feel the feelings, but I didn't allow myself to like build a house there.
Exactly. Exactly. It's getting back on the horse.
Yep.
But and you tell a story about that in your book about Austin, when Austin was insisting on taking riding lessons and he
Yeah.
wanted to jump. And,
Yeah, he was really young and he wanted to take dressage. And
Mhm.
in one of like the first 3 lessons, this enormous horse he got thrown from. And I watched it and it looked horrendous.
Mhm.
And as fast as he could, he scrambled up and got back on. And I talked to his trainer later and he said, that kid's going to be fine. He's like, the hardest part is once that happens. And to me, the definition of resilience is how it's that distance between being on the ground and getting up and how
Right.
quickly you get up. Like
Yes.
to me, that is what defines resistance. It's that space and time. I mean,
Right.
eventually everybody gets up, but is it taking you, a year and a half to get back on a horse?
Right.
Or is it taking you seconds?
Mhm.
That's really the kind of defining factor. And it just taught me so much about what it is because when those moments happen, it physically hurts, it's humiliating, It's something that's beyond your control, but it's this ability to just jump right back on and keep going
Right.
that makes that moment smaller and quieter and less powerful. When you
Yes.
sit in it and you stop and it paralyzes you, that moment in time gets really, really big, really, really large and expansive and swallows you. And
Hmm.
it can define you. Like that
Hmm.
little failure becomes defining, life defining, and it doesn't have to be.
I was just thinking about how Austin was raised by a mother who who got back on the horse and had that example. And I was thinking about my own childhood. I was raised on horses. I started riding when I was 3 years old, and I was about 7 when one of my horses threw me off, and it really hurt my back
Yeah.
so badly that I couldn't really straighten
Oof.
up. And my father insisted I get back on the horse right then and there. Like, no,
Yeah.
you're getting back on the horse. Got me back on the horse, had me take a few turns, and they said, okay, let's go. We're going to go to the doctor.
Yeah, that's so wild. But yeah, I understand it because it's like that moment is either defined by getting back on the horse
Hmm.
or by like shutting down. And once
Right.
you shut down, it's really hard to find that sort of, it's the same thing, when I teach business development, people have to make calls or reach out to people. If they have a really bad exchange with somebody, I'm like, do one more because that's not where you want it to
Right.
end. Because if
Right.
you feel like, oh, I got this crappy rejection, it just washes over you. But if somebody is decent to you, it's like, okay, this might, I can do this thing.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can ask hard questions. I can make big asks, but it's really hard when somebody's really tough on you. If that's the taste in your mouth, nobody's going back for more of that.
No. And if that's the taste in your mouth, if you've gotten the taste of rejection and that's what lingers, it's going to come through in all of your communications with someone else, with the next person and the next person.
Yep.
It's going to eat away at the confidence that you carry with you, and people will pick up on that. And that isn't a selling point.
No, I mean they can feel it. You start to feel fragile. You start to feel less confident. You start to feel less sure of yourself.
Hmm.
And particularly when you're launching a business or you're trying to sell something, somebody has to feel confidence in you. Somebody has to feel trust
Right.
in you. And if you don't
Yes.
feel it in yourself, they certainly aren't going to feel it either.
No, no. And don't you think that it's really important to genuinely feel passionate about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to believe that what you do matters. I mean, for a long time, I would tell people, listen, it, I know for a fact that every single person who has written me a check is better for having done so. I would never say that to someone explicitly, but I have to believe it. Because if I don't believe that, then what in the hell am I doing? Like I can't sell something for the sake of selling it. The hardest thing you're ever going to sell in the world is yourself. It's easy to sell other people.
Right.
It's easy to sell some other product that's outside of you. The hardest thing to sell is yourself. And if you don't believe you are incredibly valuable, then that process is nearly impossible. So you have to sort of come from a place of what I do matters. I'm really good at it. And then it's easy. I mean, it's such a that's such a sort of like flippant thing to say, but the example I'll use is I've done millions and millions and millions of dollars of salary negotiation work. And I always do a flat fee. And I am certainly not the least expensive in the market. And that price just went up this year. So I'm really not the least expensive in the market. And I would, people would always say to me, well, how many hours is this for? And I said, well, usually it's 2 calls. Occasionally it's 3. Once in a great while, you have to do some counter offering and sometimes 5, but it's almost never more than that. And they're like, wow, for an hourly rate. And I would go, oh, no, no. Like, I'm not a parking meter. you're not paying for my hour. You're paying for my expertise and education and the result. So just to be clear, like this is not an hourly rate breakdown. And frankly, I'm not going to get punished because I'm efficient and I can do something in 20 minutes versus 20 hours. Like, what exactly are you paying for? And I work with a lot of attorneys and they would immediately go, fair enough. Like, where do I send the check? Like immediately, right? And for me, that was really very much about like this idea that it's like, and I would say to them, listen, there's a guy I know, a bunch of people use him. He's in like Wisconsin or something. He charges like a third or quarter of what I charge. I don't know how good he is, but he does it and you can try him out. Or you can get on the Googles and look up how to negotiate your salary. That's not what I'm competing with. Like I'm competing with myself in the work that I do.
And I think that's a very good lesson for so many people, that people will only value you as much as you value you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, it's easy, you occasionally, it still happens. I had this year somebody who was a partner at a big accounting firm who I've worked with for nearly 15 years, had moved to another accounting firm, much, much smaller, and said to them, you should absolutely hire this woman for training. And they called me. We had great calls. And he said, can you send us your fee structure? And I did. And he wrote this lovely email and he said, listen, we would absolutely love to hire you, but this is just outside of our budget. And I'm so sorry, but we really appreciate you taking the time. And for me, it's like no harm, no foul. Just because someone can't pay it doesn't mean you're not worth it. It means that particular client cannot afford you. But we have plenty of clients who can. And so it's important to understand where you sit inside of the marketplace and where your value is. And, I would say this happens on the other end too. I'll talk to somebody at a cocktail party or something, and they're like, well, I think I'm worth X. And my thing always is, you are worth what the market will pay for you. Full stop.
Right.
And you may think you're worth whatever number, but if nobody but your mom is paying that, that is not what you are worth, because nobody is willing to write that check to you. You are worth what 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 clients. Once you have market stability and you have proof of concept, that's your value. I don't even set that price. The market sets that price. So I know for a fact that this is the price that I'm worth, at least this price, because I consistently get it.
That is confidence that so many people lack, which leads to, you talked about, I love the Dr. Seuss book that you refer to in your book, Oh, the Places That You Will Go, and the waiting place.
Yeah.
So many people stuck in the waiting place because they don't have the confidence. They don't value themselves. They don't believe, or they feel, so many with imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah, it's real. I mean, listen, I've had it. I still struggle with it in different ways sometimes. It's not like it evaporates and goes away. You just have to coexist with it and do it anyway. Confidence is the prize for doing the thing you don't yet have confidence for. I mean, like it's super counterintuitive. Like you have to do the thing anyway and feel wobbly and feel weird and a little like sweaty and shamey and like walk through it. And then you're like, oh, I did it. And you're like, I did it. Like I can do the thing. But it's not like, the waiting place for me is, I've seen it over and over and over again over the years that I've done this work, of people who are like, well, I'm going to wait till I get this website, till I get this certification, till I do this thing, till my kid is this. And what it really is, it's I'm going to wait until I'm strong enough, until I'm big enough. But you're never going to, it's always going to be, you're never going to strip the fear out of sort of becoming bigger and doing what you want to do. And what I always tell people is, listen, I don't know that you can make it or not, but I know for damn sure you can't do it in this waiting place. Like nothing happens there.
Right.
Nothing. There's no growth. There's no movement. There's no advancement. And it isn't to say that I don't think there's some validity in hibernating with your ideas and nurturing them. I do, but I think you need to at some point make a decision and land, or decide you're not going to do it. And that's okay too. I think that it's okay to realize, like, you know what? I just don't think I'm going to do this thing. And that's okay. But if it's something you really want to do, you've got to try it before you're ready. You've got to try it without perfect conditions. The conditions are always terrible. It's that I can't remember if it's I don't think it is Dorothy Parker. I think it's another writer who says, you have to, like, the conditions are always terrible. You have to do the thing anyway, or something like that. I'm absolutely butchering that quote, and that's probably not even Dorothy Parker. But I do believe that that's true. The conditions are always terrible. There's always a reason something is going to be hard, but nothing is promised. If you want something to happen, or you want to try something out, today is as good a day as any.
Yes. And what do you say to I've been, it seems like, inundated with people in my practice who are in their late 40s, 50s, even early 60s. They have buku years of experience doing what they do best, and buku years of experience working for whatever company. And suddenly there's this new supervisor who is half their age or less, that's pushing them to do more and more and more, and not valuing what they do or their experience, their expertise. And they're so unhappy and they're so scared. And some of them are losing their jobs and then feeling like, well, I'm too old now to do anything else. This is all I know. But I can't, I'm too young to tap into my retirement or get Social Security. And who knows if we're even going to have Social Security in the future.
Right.
It's not something to count on. What do you say to people like that who are just kind of in this, now they're in this limbo place?
Yeah. I would say a couple of things. This is just like, for me personally, the most important thing you can do is determine your top 3 value systems. Like, when you're, from a decision-making perspective, freedom is always my top. It's not money. It's freedom. It's always at the very, very top. Impact is next, and then money. And all of my decision-making flows from that. So for me, I'm not going to work with a jackass. It's not happening. I'm not going to endure abuse. I'm not going to increase my tolerance as a strategy, because my freedom is more important, even if that means that I'm going to risk making less money or I don't care. Like that, what I know to be true for myself is that misery is a certainty if I am in one of those environments. So that, to me, is like the first thing you have to determine, because if you're just like, I want security at all costs, well, then you're going to endure a lot. You're going to endure a lot to keep that position. And it's why people stay in terrible marriages. They stay in terrible jobs. And for me, I always said, like, I'll use the PG language here, but you need to have enough FU money that you don't have to stay in a job, a living situation, a relationship that you don't want to be in. You need to have that much power. And I think that what happens to people is they become whatever their experiences in a job is, it's like, I say this all the time, a little bit of poison every day will not kill you, but it will make you incredibly sick. So no matter how smart you are, no matter how confident, competent, and capable you are, if you're in a toxic environment, you start to believe it. You start to question yourself. And even if you leave that job, you have no sort of, your core is weak. You don't have any like sort of strength to grow from. And so it's really hard to do. But that job is not a life. And that job is sort of devouring your happiness, your joy. And, I will just say, I have friends, I encounter lots of clients who are exactly that person. They will stay and stay and stay. And I just don't have that in me. I think life is incredibly short and a job is a job. And I think money will come and go. And I don't think anybody, I was, for all the ways my father was not a traditional father in raising me, the thing that my dad would say to me is nobody on their deathbed goes, God, I wish I had stayed in that job longer or worked more
Right.
hours. Like no one has
Right.
said this in the history of deathbed utterances. No one.
Yes.
And so, what, people will always go, should I take this job? And I always say, what do you want your life to look like? Like, it's not just the
Right.
job. What is the life you want? And once you kind of know what your value systems are, every decision is incredibly quick because you just think, is this bringing me closer or further away from my value system? Because that determines whether you're going to be happier, balanced, more productive, and more engaged in your life.
I think it's so daunting for so many people when they get to a certain age to think of starting over and doing something that's completely different than what they've spent the majority of their life
Yeah.
doing. But it can also be a completely new chapter, a
Yeah.
completely new. You're an artist, and you express your art not just on canvas,
Mhm.
but in your magnificent garden that you've created and the clothes that you wear and the way you express yourself every day. I think we the other day I was observing your outfit online and and I said, not every palette is made of canvas.
Yeah.
Not every painting is made of canvas. It can be what you're wearing, it can be your surroundings, it can be your life. And if you have the creativity, if you have that in you somewhere,
Yeah.
all you have to do is find the will to express it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that for me, creativity is the thing that has helped me survive for lots of reasons. But I think we all start that way. I think
Hmm.
we start open and courageous
Hmm.
and wild and engaged with the world. And then the world kind of beats the shit out of us. And it
Yes.
tells us you can't wear that. You can't look like that. Like, what are you doing? Who do you think you are? Like,
Right.
and it starts challenging us. And so what we do is we contort ourselves to make ourselves smaller, more palatable. We maybe don't say the thing we're thinking out loud, or we, don't wear that jacket, or we don't do whatever. And we start contorting ourselves in 1,000 ways to be palatable, to be acceptable. And what I think happens is we get very, very far away from who we are. And we
Right.
get very, very far away from our own power. And so we can't even hear the internal voice anymore. I mean,
Right.
sometimes like the clients you're talking about who are in that position, when I get clients like that, that voice is so quiet now. They can't
Hmm.
even hear it. They can't even hear
Hmm.
if you say like, hey, if there were no rules and money were no object, what would you do? It's like, what? I mean, I
Right.
remember I would often say to clients, one of my questions was like, who were in transition and job transition, I would say, what do you want like a Wednesday afternoon to look like? And they would go, what do you mean? And I'd say, a Wednesday afternoon. It's 2:30. What's happening? And the reason I would ask them that is if your only goal is to just get a job to pay your bills and do that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And in no way do I want to diminish that. Just for the record, I came from a culture of poverty where all of my people worked for paychecks to survive. So
Right.
just so
Right.
we're all clear about this, I'm not
Hmm.
coming from some position that this is true for everybody in the world. I busted my ass for a long, long time to get to this position. But that said, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's also nothing wrong with wanting something different and something more. And I think there's also a lot of guilt for people. I have clients, I'm sure you do too, Sandra, they've paid so much money for their education. They've made all these commitments.
Right.
And the idea that you would pivot away from that feels like failure, even when you're choosing it.
Right. Right. Yes. I mean, so many people die with, as Wayne Dyer says, die with their music still in them. And what a sad commentary. I know I was raised by a man who was an entrepreneur. He did not have it in him to work for someone else. He was far too cantankerous to do that. And so, and he was a salesman, and he became an insurance salesman. And then he had his own farm, and he ran a laundromat. He had all these little businesses. He was a real estate agent, and he did all of this stuff. But still I inherited the thought that if I'm going to make money, I'm going to have to do things that I don't like to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how he raised me. You do whatever you have to do, and you work hard. And if it's something you don't like, that doesn't matter. You just have to do it. So, when I told him that I really wanted to go into art, and I really wanted to go into ceramics in college and throw pottery. And he said, that's great, but you'll be doing that in your tent.
And you're like,
right. I looked at my brother and I thought, but I want to be like him too. And he's become a doctor. He's older than me. He's become a doctor. I really look up to him. And, everybody told me that I probably couldn't do that. I probably didn't have the moxie to do that, or the smarts to do that, or whatever. But
who told you that?
Well, it was kind of my brother at times. And then I don't know if I got that idea from maybe teachers along the way. And it wasn't until I told the story in my first episode that I was sitting watching my future college advisor put all 4 years of pre-med out on a whiteboard, and feeling like, oh crap, what am I doing here? And my father leaned over and he said, you are every bit as smart as your brother. It wasn't until that moment that I thought maybe somebody in my family has faith in me that I can actually do this.
Yeah.
Was there a part of me, though, that really wanted to be an artist? Absolutely. And so I found ways to weave that into my life along the way. But it's, this journey of medicine has changed from 1996 when I graduated from residency. It's become really arduous and really tied to the constraints of insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and healthcare corporations. And we often are told what we can and can't do in medicine by people who have no degree in medicine whatsoever.
Right.
They're, so is it what I want to continue doing for the rest of my life? Probably not.
Yeah.
And so I'm finding ways to be creative. I've developed a podcast, and there are other directions that we can go in our lives. We just have to have the guts to do it.
Yeah. And I think also just like pivoting and trying stuff on, like you don't have to stay married to it. I tell people that all the time, like,
right.
Trying something out and realizing, no, I don't like this, or this isn't what I thought it was. Like, that's not a failure. That's you just trying things on. And I think that, I think American culture is so much about like, I've seen this with like kids, right? It's like, never quit, never quit, never quit. And I think, I am like a self-proclaimed quitter. I quit relationships, crappy jobs, crappy clients. I am not just going to stick it out. Like, I don't think there's some weird prize in that. It's like part of being a grown-up and part of understanding sort of what you're good at or what you want to do is being able to course correct sooner rather than later. And this weird, like, cultural paradigm of like, suck it up and stick it out no matter what. I don't know that that's great. I mean, there are things you should walk away from. There are things you should quit. And listen, if you on day one are like, this is not for me, awesome. Then you saved yourself a hell of a lot of time.
That's right.
And again, it's the lens of like, do you see this as a failure, or do you see this as, and I think, you're saying something really interesting, like medicine has changed. Like sometimes it's not you who's changed, it's the industry or the job or the whatever, or the culture. things change. They're always evolving. And part of it is to just be responsive to that and understand whether or not it's changing in a way that you want to participate in and adapt to. Or is it something that you're like, you know what, this isn't for me anymore? And
Right.
feeling that even when you don't know how you're going to package and pivot your skills and shoot your arrow in another direction, trusting that nothing is wasted and all of that experience and knowledge and education can have a new life. You just don't know what it
Absolutely.
is yet.
That's right. That's right. So before we wrap this up, I want to give you an opportunity to say to the listeners or listener, maybe, hope,
10 to 25,000, whoever you are.
Exactly. Hope springs eternal. But
For sure.
what would be your sort of parting words of wisdom to people who are out there in the waiting place? They know that their music is still in them. They don't want to die with it still in them. What would you say to them?
I would say don't worry about the big plan and don't worry about the outcome. Take the first tiny step. And if the step is tiny, cut it in half and make it even tinier. Like you get there in increments, and this idea that you have to have, it's like my biggest joke is like the 5-year plan. It's just so absurd. Like nobody has some 5-year plan. Like, what is the very, very first thing you can do to inch your way towards that thing? Sometimes that thing is just a conversation. It's you calling somebody and going, I think I hate this, or I
Right.
think I want to do, like you externalize the struggle, or externalize the desire. That alone is the very first step that sparks something that invites you to take the next step. And so my strongest advice is move. Even if it's
Yeah.
incredibly incremental and small, you would be astonished by the energy that that will give you and just the feeling of hope that will light in you.
I love it. I love it. Ann Marie, it's been, as always, a joy and an inspiration to talk with you. And I hope to see you for coffee soon.
Yes, we will definitely go get coffee or a cocktail. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on this great work. Everybody's lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you, Ann Marie. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to my audience and hope that you join us next time. And thank you to my great producers, Brian and Shayna of Procast Studio. Without them, of course, none of this would happen. So thank you very much. And thank you, Ann Marie. And see you next time.